please give a warm welcome to director Johan Renck. It kills me to kill the Sparks song halfway through, which, by the way, the song that you were hearing, that's by Sparks.
And Max.
And Max Richter, the composer.
The funny thing is that my first idols as a 10-year-old back in the 70s in Sweden was my grandmother gave me and my brother, we loved music, a cassette tape of a band called the Sparks, an album called Came Out of My House, and me and my brother devoured that album and all the consecutive albums after that. So they were my first heroes as a small child, actually. And then over the years, through some various serendipitous events pertaining to me having spent 10 years as a musician in the 90s and then going into music videos, I got to know Ron and Russell from the Sparks. So when we were finishing this movie, Max said to me, like, shouldn't we write a song for the end titles, and have somebody fanciful sing on it? And I say, that we should do, and I know exactly who's going to do it. So I called Ron and Russell. So Ron and Russell and Max composed this song together and wrote it and all that. And I think it's absolutely beautiful, actually. So.
Stunning, yeah. My first question is about the opening shot, which it's so beautiful, and it summarizes the film in a way. You have him on the spacesuit, and he's in this beautiful landscape walking, containing that spacesuit. Was that in the novel, or is something that...
No, I mean, I'm going to sound like a real twat right now. I dreamt that shot, So I dreamt that shot because as I was kind of, to some extent, part of this film deals with a Dvorak opera called Rusalka, which is basically the Little Mermaid story, to be honest, And there was this thing in this story, which is that, there's these two lovers who can't be together, blah, 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 blah. And, if they would kiss each other, they would die, And I really love that, And so I wrote that sentence, I just want to kiss, that will kill you, And that night I dreamt of Adam walking around in a spacesuit in a river, in a beautiful forest river. And that became that scene. It was literally a dream. I sound like an idiot, but it's true. Yeah.
Yeah, but it summarizes the film as well, where this character is self-contained and is not aware of the beauty and the family surrounding him.
He's self-contained. He's lost in his own sort of self-involved existence, manifested through the spacesuit. Like you say, completely oblivious to the beauty of nature, the sunlight coming down from the branch, the water, the beautiful, vegetation under the water, all that kind of. He has no idea. All he is this spaceman with no function on the planet anymore, to some extent.
Tell us about how you arrived to the spaceship. It's chaotic. I mean, we're used to seeing the sci-fi films where everything is minimalist and beautiful, and this is like, it's chaotic and messy.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, on one end, it was actually one part of it that I wanted it chaotic because I can't stand chaos, because I'm very chaotic in my head, and if I'm in a chaotic environment, I freak out. So in my house is the most pedantic house ever. My wife is the messiest person ever, and all I do is walk after her and pick up stuff because I can't have things not be in place.
Sounds familiar.
No, but what it was is, so I knew I wanted it chaotic, but what it also was is like, it's about a form of function of a solo mission to another, deep into our solar system. Everything has to be, in front of you. You have to have access to anything. If anything goes wrong, it has to be immediately obtainable to fix. You can't have it hidden behind panels and stuff like that. And Adam and I actually had a Zoom call with the astronauts on the ISS because I had some very specific questions about space. Questions like, what does it smell like up there and stuff like that, The answer to that is actually that it smells horrible in there because of the recycled air and all that. But anyways, I asked him, what are you most afraid of up there? And the answer to that was electricity, because there is so much high voltage, powering various aspects of the ISS. And it's all laid bare because if something goes wrong, we have to be able to identify where it is immediately and have access to it. So that kind of really served my idea of chaos, that everything is laid bare in front of you. There's nothing is hidden behind panels. There's no order. Everything's right there for you to access this. So that, that was perfect for me in the chaos of it all. But it also served the form and function aspect of having a congruent vessel for a, how idiotic is it to go on a solo mission to the other end of the solar system, if you think about it, Why couldn't there be two of them, I mean, at least they could have played chess or something like that. No, I'm going to do this on my own. But, yeah, so that's I hope that answered your question.
No, of course.
So.
And then the camera work, I was fascinated watching that the camera seems always floating and at the same time chaotic. Tell us about how do you arrive?
Yeah. I just want to say, I can sit and do this I love talking about this kind of stuff,
I can me too,
I can sit here till tomorrow if somebody brings food.
Okay.
Yeah, good.
You don't need to egg me on. We'll continue.
I love this. And feel free when I'm boring, just walk away. But I can be here for a long time. Anyways, I mean it's kind of straightforward actually. For me, I am my early work as a director in terms of music videos and stuff like that. I shot myself because I'm a photographer originally also. So for me, my proximity to camera and anything I do is like I'm very close here because I love photography and all that aspect of that. The simple thing is like we have to as a watcher of this film, we have to be subjected to the same kind of physics as the participants in there. If you make a film underwater, you're going to be floating around with the currents, and you're not going to put the camera on a tripod on the bottom of the ocean. You're going to be subject to the same physicalities as whatever's going on in the ocean, and that was the same in zero gravity. Like our operators will have to be operating under zero gravity as well. Mm-hmm. So I tasked my DP, Jakob, Swedish guy, another Swede, who I worked with for an extended time, Jakob Ide, brilliant guy. Like, you got to figure that shit out. How can we have perpetually zero gravity cameras in here? And so he started looking into that, and he's very resourceful, and he found everything from sort of mini kind of Steadicam rigs and all that kind of stuff. But then he eventually optioned for the whole film is shot from big 60-foot cranes sticking into the spaceship with 360 heads on them, so that the camera could rotate around its own axis. The crane could always move in and out, up and down, left to right. And for me, it was a little bit of a risk taking in it because I said, camera has to be floating all the time. And the opera go, but what about editing? How's that going to work for you? What if they kind of, if they counter each other? It's like, I know what I'm doing. Don't worry about that. But I had no idea what I was doing. But it actually worked out really, really well. I think it really worked. It actually benefited editing to have these little moments of a float that can be overtaken of another little float there. So I think it worked really well. But sorry to interrupt you.
No. Go ahead.
One more thing. Adam is hanging in these wires, 12 hours a day, and it's painful and horrible and all that. So obviously, when we're shooting like a close-up of it, like a real proper close-up, he's sitting on a chair or something like that. And the cameras floating the way they do benefited the sense of zero gravity there because they created a slight sort of parallax between Adam and the background to the extent that it didn't feel like he was sitting in a chair, but actually having a bit of motion in the space. So it had those beneficial effects also, that we didn't have to have him strung up at every instance.
Well, what I was going to say is that also the beauty of what you created is that there's a sense of floating psychologically about him as well.
But that, you're very right. But you are right, because that's the intention. Everything I make, I've come to understand, has to. From when you're watching it, has to be immersive enough so that that you're part of the experience. To me, it's an experiential thing. I do not have any interest in making things that you watch as you're watching a diorama. You're here, and the ongoings are there. for me, it has to be experiential, that you're watching it, partaking in it to some extent, you know. And so to me, and that's one of the most fascinating aspects of filmmaking is, who is the eye? What is the eye? I.e. the camera. Who is this observer? One of the most challenging things that I never really came to terms with are all the exterior shots outside a spaceship, on a spaceship flying by. Like, I'm like, who's watching that? Who's out? Is there like who's floating around there? Like, oh, here comes a space, you know? Who is the eye for that? And for me, that always, it pops the illusion a little bit for me, whereas everything else it's observational, as if you are partaking in the film. And that is something that I always like in everything I do.
And speaking of the interiors and the exteriors, I love the cinematography that in the interiors it's all artificial lighting, and there is this dark crevices in it, and then outside just becomes beautiful. And you know, tell us about that dichotomy.
Yeah. Massively challenging also, again, because I'm very much an in-camera person, to be honest. And you know, the fact that everything outside of this spaceship is computer generated, you know, and how do you do that? Because the problem with that is that it's you have too many possibilities, you know, and you have it's like, you know, the Leonard Cohen, you know, there's a crack in everything, there's where the light comes in. That's the same thing when it comes, there's a very big difference between pretty and beautiful. Beautiful is a little bit broken, you know, there's a chipped edge on something that is beautiful, whereas something pretty is just vapid and pretty, you know. And it was really important that for the for the space to really become beautiful, you know, melancholically beautiful, and have a darkness and something broken in it, you know. And it was also impossible to consider, you know, the expanses of these shots. How you know, some of the widest shots, you know, I would try and say, like, how much distance is it from the either sides of frames? We're talking hundreds and thousands of kilometers, you know, because the grandness of space. How do you make that even make sense? You know, what's your comparability in it? And I'm sure you've all seen all this incredible imagery from all these fantastic telescopes. You know, those images are like, it's indescribably beautiful. But the thing that I always found fascinating when you see a beautiful picture of a nebula, you know, there's all sorts of horse nebulas and all this beauty, and they look so beautiful. And then you ask somebody, and I was like, what's the distance between the top of this nebula here and down there somewhere? And they go like, oh, that's about 400 million kilometers. And it's like, what does that even mean? You know what I mean? And to some extent, we're dealing with that here also. How can you, because in order for it to be beautiful and in order for that images to work, you have to be able to compute it, you know, to get it to some extent. So, I mean, again, but it was really fun to dig out the reference images in terms of all these nebulas and supernovas and all these tremendously fascinating stuff that goes on out in this tremendously weird thing that is our universe, and using that as a little bit of a basis for at least not what it should look like, but what it should feel like, you know, when you watch it, you know. And then eventually, finally, after, you know, designing all that, how do we make it look analog and not like a digital thing? You know, how do we chip off stuff? We put dirt on the lens. We create flares. We do all these kind of things that you have to deal with in order to make something not feel like a Pixar image or something like that. Correct.
On the same vein, Hanush, when I first saw him, I was petrified, horrified. I have a fear of spiders. And then all of a sudden, slowly, in close-ups, it becomes endearing. You know, tell us about, you know, mapping that trajectory. At first, literally, I don't want to spend a single moment with Hanush. And by the end, I was in love with Hanush.
I'm a massive arachnophobic, so I'm the same, 100%. The interesting thing with Hanush is that I did so much work absolutely for no purpose whatsoever when it comes to Hanush. Because the idea with Hanush is exactly what you describe. And the idea of Hanush was like, the first time you see him, you should be repulsed and horrified and all that. And then eventually you should continue to be repulsed, but now you're no longer scared. Now you just find him disgusting. And then eventually throughout the film, you have to find him endearing and lovable and all that. And I was like, when I started working with Carlos Fuentes, who was the concept artist I was working with, when I started working with him, it was like, so here's the deal, Carlos. We got to make something that is horrendous, disgusting, despicable, pathetic, but also cute and kind of beautiful. And like, so, yeah, you know, give me your best shot, man. And it turned out we were both utterly wrong, you know, because what it is like you can, and it's a beautiful thing about us humans, you know, and about love, you know, it's like you can make the most revolting, disgusting thing ever. If it has a good heart and a good soul, you're gonna love it, you know. That's just the way it works, you know. And so that's what it is. So all this idea, like, how can we visually make sure that our audience will feel all those feelings that I want them to feel through his appearance? You know, that was just like a very sort of not very sort of profound way of looking on it, you know.
And how did you arrive at and Carlos and you arrived at the design? Because you're not referring to other sci-fi creatures we've seen. It's something very unique and organic.
But again, you're spot on there, because when I was going through all these concept artists, because there's a lot of them in this world, I felt that every single one of them were riffing on the vernacular of film. You know, every drawing I would see was like, yeah, but that looks like the swamp monster, or that looks like Yoda, but, you know, whatever. And then I found Carlos, and his things look like, this looks like the work of a deranged human. You know, he has no reference to anything else. And then I found out he's the guy who kind of was part of creating the creatures in Arrival.
Arrival, yeah.
Yeah, and to, you know, what you can say about those creatures is that, yeah, that's not like something we've ever seen. I don't even know what they are, you know. So, and then when I started talking with Carlos, he was very much of that kind of, you know, he comes from he's a true artist, and but he's also he's curious about his own process, you know. So he's like, what do we know about this creature? We know, you know, a few things from how it's described in the book, you know, in the Spaceman or Bohemia book. But again, in the book, it's very, very impressionist, you know, because it's a book. So he's described in ways that are utterly impossible to translate into film. So we have to make it kind of congruent and figure that out. So, but it became both you know, it was so much back and forth between us, because we both know that we have to have something to talk about. So he's like, let me just go home and make a couple of sketches. I'll send them over. And for me, I know that I'm very good at knowing what I want and what I don't want. So he would send me 10 sketches, and I would take like 8 of them, nothing. These 2, there's something interesting. And then we would go on like that. And then for him, you know, for Carlos, it then also becomes about physiognomy and like, and sort of like, what is the actual sort of function of this body? How does these limbs work? And where is its, you know, digestional thingy? And how many lungs does he have? And all that kind of stuff, which is a really fun thing, you know, because it's not only about like, let's do a funny spider that is big, but it's also about like, in order to give him Hanush meaning, we have to pay attention to all the aspects of what's housing this creature, its body, the soul, where's the brain, and how you know, how does he talk? Does he have vocal cords and all that kind of stuff?
Mm-hmm. And the eyes are the many eyes are so expressive.
Yeah.
Speaking of expressive eyes, I have never seen Adam Sandler's eyes being utilized with so much expression. You tapped into something I've rarely seen. And I'm a big fan of Punch Drunk Love and Uncut Gems. You know,
no, it was a discovery. You know, that was a real thing. Because I was like you, I love him in his dramatic roles. You know, those dramatic roles. You know, Punch Drunk Love, Uncut Gems, Funny People. You know, a few of those films. But at the same time, I knew that this is not at all about any. He's still a version of Adam Sandler in those films, and here he's not. You know. And we started filming, and I knew he's a great actor, and I know how much he gave himself. And the one thing that I learned was that he's a comedian, and as a comedian, by necessity, you have to be fearless. And he's utterly fearless. He's not afraid of, being ugly or weak. He's fearless. He's a guy who stands up on stage and makes self-deprecating jokes that are like cringeworthy. That's what comedians do. So he's absolutely fearless. And what happened was that he was like, it was never anything of him going like, I don't want to do that. It was like, yeah, man, whatever, man. But I immediately noticed on the first or second shooting day that he had this tremendous capability in his eyes to do these like micro moves, that a moment of apprehension was sort of was represented by like this micro look of his eyes, or so I got obsessed with that. So I started filming in there, and then as the film went on, I just crept closer and closer, and towards somewhere along the shore, we said, do that eye thing, which is like, and he was like, what do you mean, man? Yeah, but that thing when your eyes are telling us everything we ever need to know, I have no idea what you're talking about. But he's so amazingly good at that because he acts from the right place. It's not an exercise and he's not a technical actor. He comes from the right place. Mm-hmm. He would, pull up images on his phone. I'm not even sure what those images were, but like things that would put him in emotional states, probably his family and stuff like that. He would. Mm-hmm. So it's like a mini methody kind of thing, but an instantaneous, spontaneous methody thing, mm-hmm. and that would come out in his eyes, And I to this. I've seen this film a few times now, but I love those close-up of his. He's so watchable, and his eyes are so soulful and so beautiful and so captivating. I think so. It's amazing that you picked up.
No, but you also contain him. Like he's very subdued in this film. Is that something that you guys discussed?
I'm Swedish. I mean, to me, the only thing I've ever say to actors is, hey, that's good, but let's take it down. And then I do that 10 times, and then the final note is always like, do nothing, just say the words. It's kind of, that's my favorite kind of line of directing. Don't do anything, just say the words,
But also, I was tapping into the fact you mentioned that he's on rigs, doing but he also had to overcome the pain of being in those rigs and just act like nothing was happening.
I mean, as a director, you tend to be a bit of a, I don't want to say sadist, but you're definitely Calvinist. The goal justifying the means. So I like, the idea of an actor being like, I'm filming somebody in the water and it's cold in water. We're going to do 2 more takes. You stay in that fucking water, that kind of thing, And then you're done and like, okay, get him a towel. He's cold and all that. But I remember on this particular shoot seeing, getting these pangs of really feeling terrible and guilty and shit like that, which would be like we're doing this delicate scene. Adam is hanging day 14, and this stuff is cutting into him, and I see the minute we yell cut, and the camera's right here, I see cut, and he snaps out of being Jakob and being back to earth, so to speak, and he would contort in pain and take me down. And I know that he just played the whole scene through that real pain. And I'm there like some, like I'm just thinking about myself. I just want this scene to work, but he's doing that. So I was feeling like, shit, man. And I was like, you got to tell me when it hurts. Like, no, man, I'm good. He would go like, but I could tell that he was really, so he in pain against a tennis ball, and you get that performance, that's pretty remarkable to me. So I would say that, how do you do that? I took acting classes during a couple of years. I have no intention of being an actor, but to me it was like, I got to understand how these weird guys think, actors, these freaks of nature, how do they function? How does it work? And the one thing I really took away from those acting, it was really fun. It was therapeutic for me, but it was also really fun and very, very educational. And one of the many things I took away from it was like, it's the interaction, how I would act with somebody in my little kind of improv group we had, and I'm like, oh yes, I'm acting against this girl because she's so good and she makes me so good and all that kind of stuff. And if I would be acting with somebody who wasn't really as good, I would be equally terrible. So I would say that I don't really get it, how you can do this kind of performance against a tennis ball. And then later on, when we were sort of back on Earth and we were in the Czech Republic and we were filming all those scenes with Carrie and all that kind of stuff, and I would see how Adam would be when he's with another actor, Because Adam is such a beautiful, kind, warm-hearted, generous person. So he would always be, are you okay? Is it okay if I'm over here? And Carrie would, yeah, do whatever you want. But yeah, is that fine with you? And how can I make this better? You know, he's so generous and all that. And I think I realized along the way there that, no. Adam is great in acting against the tennis ball because he doesn't have to, be considerate at all. He can just be whoever he wants to be without even thinking about being like, oh, I don't want to embarrass you, and I hope I'm not doing anything, you know.
Right.
So to some extent, I think it actually benefited him in some weird way of being this lonely guy and acting against the fucking space spider. I think this tennis ball thing really was his thing, that he could go all the way and just being as genuine as he ever wanted without even thinking for a second, what is this other person thinking about me right now? You know?
Wow. So to clarify to the audience, Hanush he was acting against the tennis ball. And Paul Dano, who does the voice of Hanush, that was recorded afterwards.
Yeah, but a year afterwards or something like that, you know what I mean? So it would be, me or the script supervisor or this friend of mine, Elke, who's a performance dancer who I brought in because I thought, like, we got to get somebody who kind of can embody a spider. And Elke is this, crazy performance artist who would scare the shit out of Adam because she would be Hanush, and he would like, oh, what the fuck is... But they eventually found each other and had a lot of good times. But she wasn't always there and so on and so forth. But a lot of the time it was Adam hanging in wires, acting against a tennis ball with me or script supervisor around the walls talking, And for me that was frustrating because every day I would come home with half a film. I have Adam's performance and I have a plate shot of a wall, and normally you come home and like, that scene's going to be so great. You see how good the two of them were, and like, it really started getting on fire there in minute 22 or whatever. But now it's like, Adam's great, and then I have a wall. So I had started having kind of, psychotic episodes, by thinking like, what am I doing here? I'm coming home every day with not even half a film. I don't know what this is going to be. I don't feel good about this stuff. I don't know what it is anymore, So it was challenging for sure.
And how did it come about? I mean, Paul Dano's brilliant. His voice, the intonation, everything. Was Paul Dano always the man?
Yeah, I was the first. As far as I can remember, you tend to fabricate truths in something like that. But the way I remember it, 100%, Paul. Michael, are you here? Was Paul was the first choice, wasn't he? Yeah. Because it was like the immediate idea of Paul Dano's cadence, his kind of awkward, slightly creepiness that he possesses, and his kind of strange. So it was like, that's Hanush, 100%. And I think Paul also, who's like an adventurous actor who does weird, fun stuff. I think he immediately felt like, this feels like something I've never done and never ever will do again. I got to try this out, So he did come and visit on set a little bit, and and I know that Adam and Paul did have a couple of Zoom sessions because this was back in pandemic days and all that kind of stuff, rehearsing a little bit and stuff like that. But Paul had the luxury of acting not only against a great actor, but also the right take. We'd cut the film there, so he's acting against the perfect take of this scene, So he's standing in a sound studio acting against Adam's face on a reasonably big screen with headphones and all that kind of stuff. So at least he didn't have that kind of weird limbo-esque experience that Adam and we had back then, because he's now partaking in like finalizing a movie. And me, they're sitting there, it's like 1.5 years after, or whatever it was, after shooting Adam on stage, that's when I was like, I think we had a scene, like all that time after,
The beauty of Hanush is that you can watch the film and you can say it's all in Adam's head, or that he's actually a creature from the beginning. Tell us about the ambiguity of the character, that we can interpret whichever way we want it about.
I think that's the beauty of all art, in terms of the fact that it lies in the eyes of the beholder, but at the same time, that the impressionist aspect of all of that doesn't work if the edges are too loose, so to speak. there's a very important scene to me in the film is when Hanush has been exposed to this kind of, whatever it's called, the gas, and he sneezes on Jakob's helmet. So there's mucus on the helmet, and he wipes the helmet. He sees the mucus, and Hanush says, "You wish to know if I'm real?" And Jakob says, "Oh, yeah, I'm as real as you are." And then for the rest of the movie, the residue of that mucus is on his visor there, because for me, I have to suggest to you guys Hanush is real. Because if I'm saying, oh, Hanush is a figment of his imagination, what else is then a figment of his imagination? Correct. My production designer, who's a lunatic French guy, he says no, this film never happened. This is a guy in his apartment whose wife has left him and he's just dreaming the whole thing, is what he says. That's my production designer. And it's like, whatever floats your boat, mate. But and I go like, how do you explain the mucus on the helmet? I imagined that too, of course, he said. So, I mean, it's
those
like,
damn French people.
And what are you gonna do?
Carey Mulligan's character, it could have been this cliche wife. Instead, she has real agency. Tell us about incorporating that aspect of the story.
Yeah. I mean, as a storyteller, you tell stories about, from where you stand and who you are and all that. And I happen to be like a white, middle-aged, reasonably privileged guy, Those are the stories I will be telling in a way. But that obviously doesn't mean that I have to sort of embrace all the trappings of that, And for me, it was really important that Carrie's character, that Lenka, was not a device in this film. That she was not only like the device needed for Jakob's story to work. I really wanted Lenka to be idiosyncratic and specific and unique and like this coolest, girlfriend you could have had. The scene in which she kind of takes him. And they break into the public swimming pool, and she says, "I have one proposition." That's intended to be like their third date or something like that. And she says, "I have one proposition for you." Yeah, go on. I go where you go, and you go where I go. Okay, meaning like let's be equal in this, and I'll follow you, but you have to follow me, and all that kind of stuff. And then they go into the pool, and he says, "Yeah, man, I'll follow you. I'll do whatever you do." And they go in there, and she wants to like have a romantic swim in this pool with him, and his. I don't like water. So, and he doesn't do, and she goes, "Suit yourself," and she jumps into the water. And that's like the whole thing. She is this alive, real, again, idiosyncratic, real human being. And he's not. He's sort of inhibited and all that. And for me, it was so important that the Lenka character was not a device, but somebody who actually was the one sane person in the film, basically.
Last question, because we have to wrap it up, is that Chernobyl and this film, you're dealing with the remnants of the communist regime. Is that a coincidence, or?
To be honest, I think that it just happens to be because when I was after Chernobyl, I was like, decided I'm done. Like I always am after any project. I'm not going to film anymore. I'm going to open a restaurant here in Brooklyn, and I'm never going to travel again. I'm going to have my kids eat their lunches here, and we're going to have this beautiful idea of me stand. We're going to play good music and have cool friends come and eat. And then this Michael, my producer, who is in here, who's kind of originated this film, Michael Wave, he's far up there in the corner, brilliant man. He sent me the script, and I was like, oh, shit, because I immediately knew that I had to do this. The fact that it had a Soviet kind of contingency, that was just accidental, because if the Spaceman of Bohemia would have been written by a South Korean author or a Greenlandish author, I would have liked the story as much. It just happened to be that Jaroslav Kelfar, who wrote the book, is of Czech origin, and part of the story in the book, way more so than in the film, is about his dealing and reckoning with the Soviet, the past of the Soviet Union. So we have it as a little thing in the film, and yes, there's a link between the Chernobyl, but if you compare that with the fact that the eye after Chernobyl got every script about Gorbachev, Stalin, Afghan war, you know, whatever you want, I think I kind of managed to steer away from the big aspect of it all.
Well, before I met you, I was a huge fan. Now, after spending time with you, I'm even bigger of a fan of yours. So thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Of
Thank
course,
you
absolutely.
so much.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. Thank
Spread
you.
the word, people, about the film.
Yeah, do it. Go on TikTok, everybody, right now.